I'm going to show you everything you need to know to hit the ground running as a Shadow Priest in Cataclysm Classic for both raiding, dungeons, and all endgame content at level 85. Starting off with which race are we going to pick if we haven't already? Well, humans are one of the best if you are going Alliance. One of them that you may not think of off the bat is Diplomacy, increasing reputation by 10%. Some of the enchants we're going to need at level 85 in Cataclysm Classic will require reputation, and therefore getting there quickly is actually quite important. We also have a 3% spirit boost from the human spirit, helping with our mana, etc. And if you are doing any PvP, there is also the Will to Survive, removing all movement impairing effects on a 2-minute cooldown. Should you be more of the Horde persuasion, Trolls are the best, namely because of beast slaying. If we are up against beasts, it's an extra 5% damage. However, the main reason is for the Berserking cooldown racial. It's on a 3-minute cooldown, increasing your casting speed by 20% for 10 seconds. This is a massive DPS cooldown, and honestly is one of the best racials in the game, in my opinion. Looking at the stat priority, Intellect is going to be our top priority in Cataclysm. It's going to be giving us spell power, more mana, and also increasing our crit. After that, we're going to want to get Spirit and or Hit up to the hit cap of 17%. You don't need any more after this. We can see here we have the talent, Twisted Faith, increases your shadow spell damage, blah blah blah, and grants you spell hit rating equal to 100% of any spirit gained from items or effect. And that is the reason why we can use spirit and or hit as a one-on-one ratio. After that, we're actually going to want haste, specifically up to our soft cap. If you're not sure what this means, basically, depending on how much haste we have, there are different breakpoints where some of our dots, or damage over time spells, of which, as a Shadow Priest, we're using lots of, will actually do extra amounts of damage. Imagine I have a spell that does damage over 10 seconds every 1 second. If we have a certain amount of haste, it'll add an extra tick or second sort of thing of damage, another hit of damage within its timeline dealing damage, if that makes sense. If you're wondering what these breakpoints look like, I've written them out for you here. At 18.74, we gain an additional tick on our Devouring Plague dot. At 24.97, we get one on Shadow Word Pain. And then we're going to get more on Devouring Plague and then Shadow Word Pain and Vampiric Touch, etc. as we go up. If you're like, oh my god, my brain's going to explode, worry, just use haste as your top secondary stat in its priority. After that, it's going to be Mastery, and lastly, Critical Strike being the least attractive to us as Shadow Priests. If you're wondering what our Mastery does, it increases the damage done by your Shadow Orbs. Flat, basic, pretty simple there. What are Shadow Orbs, may you ask? Well, here we go. You have an 18% chance for your damaging spells to grant you a Shadow Orb each time they deal damage. Casting a Mind Blast or Mind Spike spell consumes all Shadow Orbs, increasing damage of that spell by 28% per Shadow Orb, and generating increased damage on your periodic spells for 15 seconds. You can have up to a maximum of 3. The way we're going to use this is basically just using our Mind Blast on cooldown, absorbing those Shadow Orbs. It's kind of a passive effect. You don't need to worry too much about it. So now that we've gone through the stat priority, let's have a look at what talents we're taking. Of course, most of them are going to be in the Shadow Tree, a few of them also being in the Holy Tree as well. Starting off with Darkness, this is increasing your haste. We have Improved Shadow Word Pain, increasing the damage of that spell, and Veiled Shadows, decreasing the cooldown of your Fade ability and reducing the cooldown of your Shadow Fiend ability. These are these two middle ones here. Shadow Fiend we can use to get mana back and it'll attack our target doing some damage, and Fade reduces all of our threat. On to the next row, we've got Improved Mind Blast, reducing the cooldown of Mind Blast, and while in Shadow form, our Mind Blast also has a 100% chance to reduce all healing done to the target. We will be in Shadow form at all times as a Shadow Priest. It's here on just next to my camera. You can see Shadow form, assume a Shadow form, if I could say it, increasing your shadow damage by 15%, reducing all damage done to you, and increasing party and raid members' spell haste by 5%. We will be in this at all times as a Shadow Priest. We've got Improved Devouring Plague, another dot we have. It instantly deals some of its damage equal to the periodic effect it will deal, passive effect on there. Twisted Face, increasing your shadow damage by 2%, granting your spell hit. We spoke about that. We went through this hit rating regarding Spirit. This is where we get our Shadow form. We've just spoken about that. Harness Shadows increases the chance for you to gain a Shadow Orb. That's our Mastery, remember. When dealing damage with your Mind Flay and Shadow Word Pain, and you've got a 100% chance to gain a Shadow Orb when you critically hit with any attack. Then we have Vampiric Embrace. We can basically keep this up at all times before you go into combat. Fills you with the Embrace of Shadow Energy, causing you to be healed by 6% and other party members to be healed of any single target shadow damage. It's here. Put it on before you go in. You can see it stays up at all times. Just use it at all times. And also, when you take a damaging attack equal to or more than 10% of your health, or damage yourself with your Shadow Word Death, you gain some mana back. So when you take a big hit of damage, you're going to gain some mana back. Mind Melt increases the damage done of your Shadow Word Death and targets at or below 25% health. When you deal damage with Mind Spike, your cast time on your next Mind Blast is reduced, lasting 6 seconds, and that can stack twice. Vampiric Touch is another dot we're going to speak about soon. And then we have Psychic Horror. You terrify the target, causing them to tremble in horror and drop their main hand and ranged weapons. This is a cooldown, mainly used in PvP, really, but we need to put the point somewhere, and it can be useful. 2 points into Sin and Punishment. When your Vampiric Touch is dispelled, again, that's that dot here we're going to be talking about shortly, the Dispeller and all nearby enemy targets have a 100% chance to be instantly feared in horror. When your Mind Flay critically hits, the cooldown on your Shadow Fiend is reduced. Shadowy Apparitions, one of my favourite talents. When you deal periodic damage with a Shadow Word Pain, you've got a 12% chance to summon a shadowy version of yourself, which will slowly move towards the target affected by your Shadow Word Pain. Once reaching the target, it'll do damage, another passive effect. While moving, the chance to summon the Shadowy Apparition is increased by 60%. You have up to 4 of them active at a time. And lastly, Dispersion, a defensive spell where you go into pure shadow energy, reducing all damage taken by 90%, and you're unable to attack or cast spells, but you're going to regenerate 6% of mana every 1 second for 6 seconds. So it's a big defensive and also a good way of regenerating mana. Lastly, the few talents we're going into in Discipline: reducing the mana cost of instant spells as Mental Agility, increasing damage done with Shadow, Twin Disciplines, and lastly, Evangelism. This is also quite an interesting take on the Shadow. When you cast Mind Flay, you gain Evangelism, and it stacks up to 5 times, lasting 20 seconds. And basically, this Dark Evangelism that we're going to be stacking up from using our Mind Flay, it's going to increase the damage done by our periodic Shadow spells by 2%. We can then use Archangel, and it's our only real main Shadow cooldown, where we consume that Evangelism effect, causing an effect depending on what we've consumed. It's always going to be the dark one, because we're Shadow. Instantly restores 5% of your total mana, and increases damage done by your Mind Flame, Mind Spike, and Mind Blast, and Shadow Word Death by 4% for each stack. Basically then, when we cast Mind Flay, you can see that as we channel it, we're going to get stacks of this, Dark Evangelism. Periodic shadow damage is increased by 10%. We can then use Archangel to consume that effect, instantly restoring mana and increasing the damage of our next spell. And you can see it here on the tooltip, but easy to read really when it's like this. Damage done by your Mind Flay, Mind Spike, Mind Blast, or Shadow Word Death is increased by 20%. And then we can use our spells, etc., to use that Dark Archangel effect. Regarding the glyphs we're taking, we've got Glyph of Mind Flay, increasing its damage. Shadow Word Death. If your Shadow Word Death fails to kill your target, your Shadow Word Death's cooldown is instantly reset. And Shadow Word Pain, increasing the periodic damage of that spell. For the major glyphs, we have the Fade one. That's the one that reduces your fret, reducing the cooldown of it. Spirit Tap is interesting. When you kill a target that has Experience or Honor with your Shadow Word Death, you receive some mana back over 12 seconds. And Glyph of Inner Fire, increasing armor gained from your Inner Fire. This is your inner spells here, more on those shortly. Glyph of Fading reduces the mana cost of your Fade, which again is the threat reduction one. Reduces the mana cost of your Fortitude with Glyph of Fortitude. And your Glyph of Shadow Fiend, which again you can attack your target and get some mana back. If it dies due to damage, you get even more mana back. So how is it all going to come together into a rotation then? First things first, we're going to be using our dots or damage over time spells. We're going to use our Shadow Word Pain, basically causes damage over 18 seconds. Our Devouring Plague afflicts a target with disease that causes damage over X amount of seconds. 15% damage caused by the Devouring Plague heals the caster. You can only have this one on one target at a time. And Vampiric Touch we're going to put up as well. So these are our 3 main dots, or damage over time spells. Oh, and there goes a Shadowy Apparition. Vampiric Touch causes shadow damage over X amount of seconds. When you deal damage with Mind Blast, you cause up to 10 party or raid members to gain mana back. Basically, in single target, keep these dots up at all times. One thing to note is that when we use Shadow Word Pain, it is going to be refreshed by our Mind Flay. So that's going to refresh the duration on our target. And here you can see our Shadow Orbs, which we now have 3 of, which is our maximum. And then we can use our Mind Blast to absorb those orbs. Afterwards, you can see we've got Empowered Shadow, 28% increased periodic shadow damage. So a lot of these effects are going to be telling you when to use them. Like when we get our free shadow orbs, your Mind Blast will light up, so you know, oh, I've got my free shadow orbs, it's time to use it. We're going to be using Mind Blast on cooldown anyway. So again, just to recap, use your Shadow Word Pain, Devouring Plague, and Vampiric Touch on the target at all times. Keep those up. Use your Mind Flay to refresh your Shadow Word Pain, and also get your stacks of Dark Evangelism. When you get 5 stacks of it, your Archangel will light up. Use it at this point. That's going to empower your other spells. Use your Mind Blast on cooldown, and use that also to use your Shadow Orbs that are going to be generating. And Shadow Word Death, it's going to do massive damage to the target, especially if they're at low health. Use it generally only when they're at low health. Otherwise, you are going to take some damage. You can use it if you want when they're at higher health, but again, it's not as good. So just keep up your dots, use your Mind Flay to refresh power, Shadow Word Pain, and also to get your Evangelism up. Consuming your Evangelism with Archangel, use your Mind Blast to consume your orbs, and also on cooldown anyway. We keep up Vampiric Embrace at all times. Use your Shadow Fiends to get mana back and do damage. Fade if you have Fret, need to get rid of it. And also Psychic Scream or Psychic Horror to fear people or ads if you need to. We've also got Dispersion, which I forgot to put on the bars. You can see here we're going into a Shadowy Smoke, and that's your big mana regenerating defensive, remember. A few other things we've got in the space of utilities is Cure Disease. We can remove disease from our target, generally more so the healers will do it, and we can also remove magic effects. We have Master Spell to remove magic effects in an AoE area, which is really amazing. No other class has this. And don't forget to put Powered Fortitude on your allies and yourself to give them more stamina and survivability. Lastly, we have Inner Fire or Inner Will. You can only have one of these buffs up at one time. A burst of holy energy fills the caster, giving you spell power and increasing your armor from your items. Don't forget, we are taking the Glyph of Inner Fire, increasing the armor gained. This massively helps your survivability. You can also take Inner Will, increasing your movement speed and reducing mana cost, but Inner Fire is much, much better, especially from a DPS standpoint. If you're looking at doing AoE damage and you're wondering how do you do the rotation for that, try and dot up Shadow Word Pain on as many of them as possible, Devouring Plague on one of them, and the same with Vampiric Touch. Use your Mind Flay to renew the Shadow Word Pain on those targets as applicable and kind of just rotate that around with them. And if there's loads of enemies, you can also use your Mind Sear. Causes an explosion of shadow magic around a target, causing damage every 0.9 seconds for 4 seconds to all enemies within 10 yards around the target. So you can dot them up and then use Mind Sear if there's a lot of enemies. One other thing I should mention is Mind Spike. Only really using this if we the target isn't going to live very long, really. Blasting the target with Shadow Frost damage, but extinguishes your shadow damage over time effects, which is why we're only using it if the target isn't going to be alive for long, because it's only going to be used if we're not going to get the full effect of our dots. Otherwise, we don't really want to be doing that because we want our dots on there. Mind Spike increases the critical strike chance against Mind Blast on the target, so we can use a few of those in our Mind Blast, not bothering to put our dots up if the target is going to die really quickly, and therefore again our dots won't make much use. In that instance, you can obviously use your Shadow Word Death when they get low health as well. That's pretty much it for the general rotation and talents, etc. of Shadow Priest in Cataclysm Classic. Regarding consumables and professions, things like that, one thing to note, you will need to get Pharazane and Guardians of Hyjal Reputation. For the Arcanum of Hyjal on the head slot, there's a similar one for Pharazane and Deepholm for the shoulder slot. You can see here, add 60 intellect. If you are a human priest, you will get Diplomacy, remember, increasing how fast you gain reputation. For the weapon, I would go for Power Torrent, increasing intellect by 500 for 12 seconds now and then when doing damage with spells. For the gems, Brilliant Inferno Ruby, adding intellect, Reckless Ember Topaz, adding intellect and haste, and the Purified Demon's Eye, so this is for red, yellow and blue slots, by the way. Purified Demon's Eye, giving intellect and spirit on the blue slot. Regarding the professions you should take, tailoring is fantastic for the Lightweave embroidery. You can increase this, you can put this onto your cloak as an enchantment, increasing spell power by 295 occasionally. Regarding the second profession, you could go with dual crafting, you could go with enchanting. Enchanting, in my opinion, is more fun because it's adding something where we can enchant 2 rings, giving us 23 spell power on each ring for 46 spell power. You could go for dual crafting and therefore getting 3 really good red gems, which are going to add spell power. You can use 3 of them as a dual crafter. That ends up being, so to be specific, it's the difference between the Brilliant Inferno Ruby and the better dual crafter only gems. It comes out at an added bonus of 48 spell power, whereas with enchanting, you're only getting 46. However, I just think enchanting's really good, and for 46 versus 48 spell power, it's so negligible, and you're just getting some gems, which we already have gems, and I think it's fun because enchanters get something extra, which is, being able to actually enchant their rings rather than just get something better. But again, really just pick whatever professions you like, and if you're min-maxing, these are the best ones. The other consumables, Flask of the Draconic Mind, increasing intellect for an hour, that's 300. Sorry, Shadow Priest here, wrong slide for a second. Draconic Mind, as I said, Volcanic Potion is the potion you're going to use in combat, increasing intellect for 1200 for 25 seconds. Severed Sagefish Head is the best food, 90 intellect, 90 stamina, and if you do need it, mythical healing potions for healing. And that's it, guys. That is how you're going to play Shadow Priest in Cataclysm Classic. If you did enjoy this video, please do consider joining my Patreon, where I've got written guides for you, spreadsheets, and also some really cool LVI and UI profiles that I've made for you guys that you may find useful. You also get a VIP channel in the Discord where you can ask me direct questions if you have any on the class, etc. I do know that a lot of people are seemingly using ad blockers these days. It's very difficult for me to make money from YouTube anyway. And I'm not saying don't use an ad blocker, but I'm just saying if you do, etc., joining Patreon really does help us creators out. Especially as I personally only do this in my evenings after my 9 to 5, but I do, of course, love doing it for you guys. So I do really, really appreciate that. If you do consider subscribing, it's down in the description. If you have any other questions, do feel free to join the Discord anyway, where I can help you out, or the community can, with any questions you may have. And if you're looking for reputation guides, dungeon guides, or other PvE guides, check out this playlist here on my channel. I've done all of the PvE guides for Cataclysm for you, whether it is priest or another class.